Hello fellow travelers, my name's SG and welcome to the channel. Today we'll be looking over one of my favorite miniseries of Batman called Batman Nevermore. This is a Edgar Allan Poe Batman crossover, mixing the stories of Edgar Allan Poe with Batman-like scenarios. A quick murder mystery that was shown back in 2001, I believe. It's a really good series. We're going to talk about the story, art, and all that, and even references to other material along the way. So, without further ado, let's get started, shall we? Batman Nevermore was written by Len Wein and the art was done by Guy Davis. Both did a phenomenal job on this series. I love the story overall, and the artwork is just phenomenally done, giving it a really noir comic book vibe, something you would see from like a detective novel, which this is definitely taking inspiration from old school Batman comics, leaning more towards the detective side rather than a mystical side. So I did enjoy that aspect of it. The story overall is that Edgar Allan Poe has come back after being kicked out of military school, and he has decided to go to a local newspaper to become a journalist. And he's in this scenario, he's become a journalist in training, and he's told to look into the mass charity ball that has been going on for years from the Gotham Elite, also known as the Gotham Gentlemen Club. But Edgar Allan Poe finds much more interest in discovering what's going on with the current murders or string of murders that's been going on, such as they call it the Raven murders because they is a raven-like creature outside and has been spotted around these crime scenes. Each of these crime scenes, they all represent different Edgar Allan Poe storylines. The first two we actually see are the Cask of Amontillado and the Telltale Heart. Now, the first one, the Cask of Amontillado, kind of gives a hint of what's going on in the story, like what is the driving force of this, but it's very well neatly hidden there, and it's very look back and you'll see it. It's a very interesting idea, and I really love the way they presented that going forward. Now, Edgar being more involved with the murder case than the charity ball leads him into discovering the secrets of this gentleman's club's like ulterior motives. Each of these members are different characters from Edgar Allan Poe storylines. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Right now we're just talking about the story. And each one has an ironic death to go alongside their references. Edgar Allan Poe and himself, while he's researching these incidences, runs across Batman, which in this scenario looks more like a raven, but Edgar Allan Poe has noted that he is much more akin to a bat rather than a raven. The story takes more place around Edgar Allan Poe, mimicking that of Batman Year One, where Commissioner Gordon was really the main focus of the story. And I do think it does take a lot of that personality off of it. And it does give an interesting take on it, making the narrator, Edgar Allan Poe, is definitely a much more interesting take, because the idea that he's the one writing the story is a fun idea in and of itself. But like I said, this gives it like Edgar Allan Poe is the Jim Gordon in this world to Batman. And that's really cool in my opinion. As an Edgar Allan Poe fan, it does fit with everything going on. We have seen this kind of thing before in various other projects and other movies that have come up, but I do think they do take an original take on this, where the murders aren't taking place from his stories, they are the inspiration to his stories. And we do see different characters coming in and out, representing, like I said, different stories of Edgar Allan Poe. This, of course, does take place in Baltimore rather than Gotham, giving it more of a real-world implication to the whole story. There are definitely certain aspects that are toyed with, but it does respect both properties. It does respect Edgar Allan Poe's storylines, and it does respect Batman overall, turning this into more of a detective comic rather than turning into a regular modern Batman comic where there's mysticism, there are ideals like ninjas and all that. They don't really focus on that, and Batman is much more of a secondary player in this. But I think to keep the theme of Edgar Allan Poe going, it was a right move to make. It was an interesting way to show how Edgar Allan Poe is reacting to all of this. And even the ending really does give way to the twists that are given throughout the story. That like we see coming as soon as we know which characters are there. But it doesn't change the ride that we take along the way for the books to build up to this, and it feels like a satisfying ending overall. It does really feel like this story had a conclusion, and that even though some of us could see it coming, it was a very solid one. Now, I'm not going to spoil the ending because as I go along with this review, I'm pretty sure you can sum up what's going to happen. But I do encourage all of you to go read the actual book series. It's very fun. You can find it on Amazon, and it does get you hooked as soon as you start reading. I read it a long time ago, and I just started rereading it for this video, and I found myself not being able to put down the books. So take that what you will, and I do encourage you all to go read the books. For the character list, let's start with our main protagonist, aka Edgar Allan Poe. In this story, he is not portrayed as an old surly version of Poe as we've all come to know in other media. This is a more younger, wide-eyed version of Edgar Allan Poe. It gives you an idea that he is still trying to find his place in the world, trying to figure out what it is he wants to do. He thinks being a reporter is a good start, but he can't help but think that his short stories and poems are more his thing. We then see him get swooped into this world, and even though he considers himself a coward overall, he does prove himself a good ally for Batman and a good alternate version of James Gordon. Instead of making him a police officer, making him a reporter was definitely the right move in this scenario. Batman is seen a lot in the books. He is seen as more of a brawler kind of thing, and more of a detective rather than a ninja or rather than a technician. We do see him produce a very large amount of physical activity, like fighting a panther or a gorilla, and even fighting certain other characters that have been known to be strong throughout the story. He's no slouch and is shown to be following Edgar Allan Poe, as Edgar has followed this case and has researched various other things and other people along the way from the Gentleman's Club, and who we are going to talk about right now, but for now we're just focusing on Batman. And his costume design is more based on the Gotham by Gaslight comic, you could tell, and probably other material that of similar views of this. But I do like this one. They make it look more like a Raven, give it more of a Edgar Allan Poe twist to the suit. It does give it character and does distinct it from all the other ones we've seen in the past. Now, some of these side characters are based on Edgar Allan Poe stories. I'll let you know which ones. And we'll start with one of the more important ones. We're going to go with Dr. Roderick Usher. Some of you may know him from the series The Fall of the House of Usher. He is a biologist and naturalist in Baltimore. He is one of the more elites and members of the Gentleman's Club that Bruce Wayne leads. He is a more important factor to the story than most of the other ones. He even has a daughter in this one known as Lenore Usher. That is based on the poem The Raven, aka Lenore in that one, by Edgar Allan Poe again. She is one of the main love interests to Edgar Allan Poe and also the assistant / daughter of Roderick Usher, so she is seen throughout the story very often. Another one of the Gentleman's Club members is Arthur Gordon Pym. He is an adventurer and world traveler and a collector of oddities. Some of you may know him from the story The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, another Edgar Allan Poe story, that he's pretty much of the same character in that, except his collection is taking more of a darker turn than it was in the original source material, but I think that's excused to add the reference of the Pet and the Pendulum in that one. We do meet another socialite called M. Valdemar, which is, of course, another Edgar Allan Poe story. Some of you may know him from The Curious Case of M. Valdemar. And then finally, the one that is the most important in this is not an Edgar Allan Poe character, but a Batman character, Professor Jonathan Crane. He is a scientist of the mind and such, as the Scarecrow is known to be in the story. The comic does follow all their stories relatively well, while allowing them to have their own take on these different aspects and characters. Like, you can definitely see, if you've read any of these, you know how they're eventual fates will end, but it is a fun and different way to take it as they go along. We do meet another character along the way who is the housekeeper to the ushers named Hendrickson. I bring him up because he is a recurring character throughout the book series. He is also in love with Lenore Usher and sees Edgar Allan Poe's arrival. Now, this didn't seem important at the time, but in the context of a Batman comic, he does seem to take the place of the Joker in this scenario, which is very interesting and different for them to do. All the characters are very well done and fit the era and the story they're trying to portray. I can't really say there was one that was out of place or felt unnecessary. They all pushed the story along very well, and they all represented their source materials very accurately and kept me wanting more, actually, at the end of the day. And I would have really liked to see a full-on series just in the style, with Edgar Allan Poe and Batman being this dynamic duo-centric characters. The artwork is very well done. I really do love it, and it's very visually pleasing. The covers in particular are very painting-like. They're very interesting. If I did know better, I could use them as like wall decorations. I could use them as real paintings. They are definitely represented by their source material. Like, even especially the very first issue, we see Edgar Allan Poe with Batman in the background. That's the common image for when we see the Raven, the story of the Raven. So it does the art for the covers very well. Now, going into the comic itself, it's very well done. It's very eye-catching. It relaxes the eyes, but has a very gritty and dark tone to it. It adds to the idea that this is supposed to be a detective comic rather than just a Batman comic. So I did enjoy that. It is a fun and enjoyable artwork. Everything is very well detailed, I have to say. I would actually like to see more comics like this. Like I said, we've seen this kind of style before with the Batman Gotham by Gaslight or Batman Houdini. We've seen this type of style before, but I think it's really shown more of its ability through these stories, because it is acting more along the lines of a Batman noir comic. It's Now, I'm going to talk about the references. I'm sure there are going to be a few I missed, so I'm just going to talk about the ones I noticed right off the bat, the ones that I can really get into. So if I miss any, and some of you are aware of the book itself, please leave in the comments down below. I would really like to see the different ones that I may or not have missed. And so yeah, let's get started. Of course, I'm not going to talk about the main characters because I already talked about them already, and their respective stories. So go back to the character descriptions on that one. Some of the ones that we do see are, of course, the Black Cat. Even though it's not really represented in this story, the cat itself is represented by a panther, which is fair because we do need a more imposing creature than a black cat coming in and out. We do see the Murder Room Morgue references with the gorilla in Usher's collection. Edgar Allan Poe is buried alive from the story of the premature burial, where he is buried by our main antagonist. We also have a Pit in the Pendulum references in Gordon Pym's collection. We have reference to him being kicked out of the military school. That is a real world reference, not even a story reference. He was kicked out of the military. And various ones like that are interesting to throw in there to add to the character being not a perfect character, but an interesting one that has an ability to grow in this world in and of itself. They keep talking about this charity ball that happens throughout the book series, and that's obviously a reference to Mask of the Red Death, because it kills the main protagonist in that one, or the Emperor in that one, at the night of the ball, and we definitely see that being Scarecrow's main goal overall. And even the beginning of every book, the title of what they are usually references to the beginning sentences in each of his works. Like even book one's called Once Upon a Midnight Dreary, which is of course a reference to the Raven's story that we it starts off with the story Once Upon a Minute as I ponder Weak and Weary. You know, that whole opening segment. So it's very nice. The touches they do are interesting, and the little bits of world building they add to this short 5-part series really does give a lot to the characters, and it gives an interesting idea of what they really wanted for this kind of series. Even the ending with Edgar Allan Poe kind of going back and retiring from being a journalist to write short stories and poems, like, leads to thinking that he does end up writing these stories just based on these events. So it's a fun touch, and it is an interesting one to make. Like I said, I love these little character introductions. I do love the little nods here and there. Now, as you can pretty much guess from all that I said throughout the review, I really do enjoy this story. It is very much worth it, and the art is fun, the characters are there, the references are neatly packed in, and even Edgar Allan Poe, who is based on a real person, is treated with respect. And you could tell that when they did the story, that there was a love to it, that of both the Edgar Allan Poe source material and Batman IP, you could tell that they actually took time to integrate the two in pretty neatly overall. You could tell that this was based more on Batman being a detective rather than him like being anything else in this storyline or in modern storylines. This has shown that like the idea that Batman is still a detective is alive and well overall. It definitely fits more in line with The Doom That Came to Gotham or the Gotham by Gaslight series. In fact, if I didn't know any better, I would think that they were complete sequels to one another, that they did fit into like a weird macabre canon of the Batman Gaslight series, I guess I would call it. That if they did do that game they were trying to do a while back, and if they wanted to expand upon it, I think Edgar Allan Poe being both a replacement for Commissioner Gordon and acting sidekick to Batman as a researcher would definitely fit, and it would give more characters some meat to their bones. It would definitely excite certain fans of this series, if there are any still out there. I'm sure there are a few. It's because you're listening to one right now. And I think that if they did that, it would be a very interesting take, and it'd be different. It'd be something unique, definitely. And I hope that later down the line we do see a resurgence of this story in particular coming out, or if even just elements come back for it, because I would definitely be all for seeing more along the way. Thank you again for listening to this review. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I wasn't too rambly, but I am very passionate about this series. I will be back on Saturday, Batman Day, to discuss the Doom That Came to Gotham animated series rather than the book, because I do feel there are a lot of good things in the animated series, and like I know it was a top rated one, so I can't wait for that. Really, it is one of my favorites. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Hope to see you on Saturday, and I might have a surprise video after that one too. And yeah, thanks for coming by, and have a great day. See you later.